Dear students, in this video I want to talk to you about communication. Communication between your web application and different web services and different ways of storing your data and working with data. And for this I will give you a few examples on how to talk to specific services. The first is something that all of you might already familiar with, is how to talk to REST APIs. I will show you a quick example of how to use WebSockets so you can do real-time communication with a server or between applications. Then I will quickly show you Google's Firebase because it offers you a free NoSQL database if you want to use that. There's also the possibility of real-time updates in the Firebase database. And then I want to make a longer example regarding authentication and authorization with Auth0. Auth0 is an identity provider. And in the last video or in the last lesson regarding the Jamstack and serverless, I've already shown you a diagram of how authentication works in a web application environment where you would use an external authentication provider. And then I will quickly show you an example of a file service. There are services for storing your files, there are also services for storing your videos, and most of them have a free plan, so please make use of that. Now, first, REST APIs. Most of you will already be familiar with REST APIs. REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and the most important thing here is that all REST APIs are stateless, as all websites are usually also stateless, and REST APIs work with HTTP methods. So everything is built on HTTP. There's GET for receiving data, POST, PUT, and PATCH for changing data, and DELETE for deleting data, of course. Usually nowadays REST APIs work with JSON, but it's not a given that the REST API has to return JSON response. It can also return HTML, XML, or anything else. Now, a few example APIs would be the GitHub REST API, or lots of other services offer APIs so you can work with them. So a quick example with the GitHub REST API. GitHub also has a GraphQL API, but the REST API, of course, is also very popular. There's a good documentation. Like with any API, it first tells you where you have to access data, how versioning works, and how to authorize yourself with the API. And to test APIs, you can of course use curl in the command line, or you can use XHR, you can use the fetch API, you can use Axios, whatever. But for trying out APIs, I like the tool Postman. So this is a REST API client that you can download. It can also be used to build and design APIs and to create a mock service, which you can use in prototyping. But for me, it's also a very good tool to test out APIs. So you can see you can create requests here. I can just copy in the api.github.com URL and then call an endpoint like users, my username, and repositories. I don't have to send any authorization or any specific headers, which you could also do very easily here. And when I press send, I will get a JSON response from GitHub with all of my repositories. So this is a long list. Yeah, it's cool. Then when developing an API, when developing an application, you might not care about the API itself in the beginning. So there are also mock APIs that you can use. Existing mock APIs like the JSON placeholder, which is really just a fake online test API, so you can test your implementation of the fetch API, of XHR, or of Axios. So Here is a very simple example with the Fetch API. There are just a few endpoints that you can call with predefined data to have a REST API you can work with when maybe your backend team is currently working on your API. You can use this instead to just try out communication. So you can see there are posts, you can also create posts, and you can try all sorts of things here. And this is a very simple example. So you can just use this URL, send a request, and you get some request back so you can work with it. And then you also have dummy and placeholder data for your application. If you want to do something that more resembles your API that you want in the end, you can use tools like JSON Server, which creates a server that you can run. And this tool, for example, works with local JSON files. So you can just create a few files for your example, like db.json. You can put in all of your example data, and then you can start the server. And if you go to localhost 3000, you can access resources like posts and everything that you've defined. Now there are also other tools that even create fake data for you, like fake names, fake strings, fake numbers, and all of those things, but they're usually a bit more complicated. But this can get you started with your APIs. Now, WebSockets. WebSockets are important if you want to do real-time things like online chats or real-time games, all sorts of things. WebSocket is a different protocol than HTTP. So normally all of your web communication happens via HTTP, and all WebSockets communication starts with HTTP. So the client has to ask the server, hey, I want to open up a WebSocket connection, and this happens with HTTP. So the request happens with HTTP and then all of the communication is switched to WebSockets, and there's also a secure WebSockets alternative, like there's HTTPS to HTTP. The API itself is very small. It's very easy to get started. So this is basically how you create the WebSocket connection on the client. And when the connection has been opened, you can use this reference to send data to the server. And then you can add a listener to listen for messages from the server. So really easy. Now there is also a very cool example page that's called echo-websocket.org. Also, there's a lot of information on websocket.org on WebSockets. And when you open this site, you can see an echo test. This lets you test this gives you a WebSocket example that you can test in your browser, and they offer a WebSocket example server. So you can just connect here. You can see we are connected, and then I can send data to the server, and the server responds with the same data. And the cool thing now is that I can see that WebSocket communication has happened, because the request you see here is a request against WS echo websocket.org. You can also see it's a type WebSocket. And in Chrome, when you open this request, you can also see all of the messages that have happened. Now, if you go to the header, you can see there has been a WebSocket handshake, and now we're in an open WebSocket communication. And all of the messages that I sent are logged in here, which is cool. And if you want to build your own WebSocket server, which I won't recommend doing for this course because it will make your projects a lot more complicated, you can use, for example, the WS library, which gives you a nice starting point to create a WebSocket server. And it makes all of this very easy. So you can just create a server, and when the server is created, you can send data and listen for data. Now, what are some more use cases for WebSockets? I've already told you can use it for games and for real-time communication. But for example, it's also used in Webpack's hot model replacement. Now, when you use Webpack, you might already be familiar with the Webpack dev server. When you open the Webpack dev server and you make any changes in your code, the page is automatically rebuilt and updated. And this happens with WebSockets. So when you open a Webpack dev server, or you start a Webpack dev server, and you open your page, a WebSocket connection to the Webpack dev server is created. And anytime you change your files, the Webpack dev server will push new data to the client. And the client then reads this new JavaScript and executes it, which is cool. Now, one other example of, well, it's not an example, but if you want to do real-time communication and not build a WebSocket server yourself, you can use Firebase's Cloud File Store, or you can use GraphQL subscriptions. Which brings me to the next topic, which is NoSQL. I won't go through all of these links. You can look at them yourself if you want to use WebSockets and Firebase in your projects. So I will just quickly show you how the store and the database work in a quick example. So when you create a new project in Firebase, you will get the ability to, or you get the chance to add apps to your project, and you can click on web here and enter a name for your application, like say 2020 example, and this will then give you a snippet that you can use in your application. So to use Firebase, of course, you need a few config variables like the API key, the API domain, and your app ID. And this is a good starting point. So you have to copy all of this, and of course there's always a good documentation on how to add Firebase to your JavaScript project. So I've just quickly went through these steps, like create a Firebase project, which I've already did. Now you've seen me register an app with Firebase. And the third step is then, of course, getting all of the dependencies. For an example, you can use an CN and copy all of these things, and then you initialize your Firebase app with the config. I've already done this here, so this is just a quick index.html file with all of the Firebase dependencies, like the app and the Firestore. Then there's my Firebase config, and yeah, this is the setup. And now you can use different Firebase features like the database or auth or whatever you would like to use. And the basic thing that I want to use is the Firestore, which is a NoSQL database. Now, when I head back to my project, I can show you how the NoSQL database looks like. If I go to database up here, and I wait for it to load, then you can see a basic NoSQL database. I won't go into the details of what a NoSQL database is and what makes it different from an SQL database, but in here you can see you have collections and documents. And these are the basic data types in a NoSQL database. Now, documents are just documents with different fields. A document can also host other collections, and a collection can have documents, and the other way around. And this is how you can build your database. It's not tables anymore, it's documents and collections. And to add a new collection, or in this case add a new document, you can just use db collection and enter the name of your collection and add some data. And so this is adding data. And of course you can also get all of your data when you use collection users get. You will get a snapshot of all of your data that you can output. Now, what's more interesting is listening for real-time updates. So when you know the document that you want to listen for, you can listen for snapshots, and you will always get the newest data because this opens a WebSocket connection. Let me just quickly run this in the browser. Now when I run this, it will add another Ada Lovelace document, and you can see here that there's another one now, another Ada Lovelace, and the document I'm listening for is the 6W and so on. So when I go here, I can see the name is Ada Smith, which is the last data that's shown here. And when I change the name to something else, like Ada Miller, for example, a WebSocket message is sent to my application and I can work with the new data. So this is just a very quick example of how you might use Firebase in your applications. Now, we've already talked about HTTP, REST, WebSockets, Firebase, and before I want to do the larger auth or auth0 example with you, I want to talk about FileStack, because it's very easy to work with text. It's very easy to send text to a REST API, to get text from REST API, and all of those things. Some of your projects might involve files or videos, which is why it would be a good idea to set up an account on some of the file services like FileStack. FileStack is very easy to use. You just create an account, copy your config and a snippet from one of the getting started pages, and yeah, it basically looks like this. You have to, of course, require or add the FileStack library and init it with your public API key, and then you can open a file picker. The file picker is very nice. It has options to also add files from various online services like Dropbox, Google Drive. You can also, of course, add files from your device or from other web pages. And this can be opened in a window, of course, as well. And you don't have to do anything. Just open the file picker, the user picks a file, and the file is then uploaded to the FileStack service. So you don't even have to host anything yourself. And what you see here is a full example of using FileStack. So you upload an object, and then you get a URL to the file. This is a public URL that is on the FileStack servers. It has a very long hash that no one can guess, and yeah, then you can send this file URL to your other API that handles all of your text and all of your data, and save it, and yeah, use it for displaying images or other files. Now, the last example, auth0. So this will be a bit more complicated, but I've already created a repository that you can check out, where you can see how this works in a very minimal, easy example. So with auth0, of course, you also have to sign up and create an account. And in your account, you can then add applications. So again, I've already added an example application, which is this one, the 2020 example application. And yeah. Okay, my secret is hidden. Good. Otherwise, I would have recorded it. And you will need this information, of course, then in your application. Now, what I've basically done is I went through these two quick start examples and simplified them and merged them into an auth example. Now, when you open this auth example, you will see two folders, a client and a server folder. Because getting data is always very easy, but when I have an access token, I can also test this access token on the server. And yeah, well, let's start with the server. So in the end, I will just have a very simple API that has only one endpoint, and the API will tell me that my access token was successfully validated and I can do various things. Now, when I start this API, start, I can use Postman to open the API example URL, and it should tell me that I'm not allowed to access this endpoint. Now I'm on localhost 3000, and I think it's API external. It's sent, no, it's on port 3001. Okay, cool. I can send this, and then I get an unauthorized error with the code 401. Great, so the API is working. Now, this is the endpoint. It's a basic get endpoint. And why is this even validating something and sending me unauthorized? Because it has a middleware. So before returning anything or before actually executing this handler, it will go through the middleware. And the middleware uses an existing middleware library that's called ExpressJot, and it uses another library that can ask servers for jot validation. Let's say it like this. Let's not make all of this more complicated than it already is. So when you receive a jot, so remember, a jot is a JSON Web Token, you have to verify it. And for this, you have to ask auth0 again, is this a valid jot? And yeah, this is the configuration that does this for you. So you might have to add a few config strings from your auth0 application and be done with it. Now, the API is already working, and now I need to get a valid jot. So the client application is just a very basic Vue CLI application that I've created with Vue CLI create, and I've checked all of the default configuration, so this is very minimal. And yeah, let's quickly run this so you can see that it's just a very small Vue.js application. Let's wait for the Webpack build. Now open 8080. And yeah, I've even simplified the Hello World component. So I do have a homepage, there's also a router and a login button. And you can see that this is Vue.js when I go to the Vue DevTools. And yeah, this is my app. Here's a router link and the home component. Now, when I go to the main.js, you can see that I have imported the auth0 plugin from a local file. We will have a look at the local file. And this is a Vue plugin that has to be configured, and then of course it can be used in any of your components. Now, much of this code is also just copied from the auth0 examples, but you can open this repository and copy this to your applications as well. Now, all of this is just basic Vue.js. The router itself is also just a basic Vue router, but it has an auth guard. So the two things that are new, that are not part of a default Vue CLI example, is these two files in the auth folder. There's an index.js and there's an auth guard that can be used in the router. And the index.js basically is the auth0 plugin that is being used here. Now, I won't go through what this is actually doing, but just know that it is a Vue plugin, which means that it will add properties, methods, and other things to your Vue instances. And the plugin itself is using an Auth0 client for starting all of this authorization flow. So yeah, leave it like this. And the auth guard itself is actually also very simple. We use the view index, the view instance that's being created in this plugin file. And yeah, if you don't know route guards, they work like middlewares in the server example. So before entering or leaving a route, you can run this guard, so to speak, that always gets a to, a from, and the next. And if you're done with the things that you want to do, you have to call next. So the next middleware is being evaluated until you get to the last middleware or the last step where the route itself is called and rendered. Now, in this auth guard, you basically just have to ask the auth service if the user is authenticated, and if he or she is, you can open the route. And if not, you should log in. You should log in with redirect, so redirect the user to a login. Now, when you've added this Auth0 plugin, all of your instances will have the $auth object. And this $auth object has a few properties or a few methods that you can use to do various things. And yeah, it also has a static method for loading, which is also interesting, and not a static method, a static property that tells you the loading state, and another one that tells you if the user is authenticated. Now, and login itself is just calling login with redirect. So let's try this and see what happens. If I click login, I will be redirected to auth0. You can see there is a very long hash and also a lot of other parameters. And I'm now at the auth0 page, and auth0 takes care of all of the user management. It takes care of the logins, it takes care of the sign up. You can also tick a few boxes in the application so that the user can use social login. The user can then, for example, log in with GitHub, log in with Google, and all of those things, or log in with Facebook. You can add all of those connections in your Auth0 dashboard, and then the user can sign up and log in with various other things. But for now, I will just sign up with an manual test user, something like this. And I sign up. And then I am authenticated. Now, Auth0 will now ask me, hey, this login flow originated, or this authentication flow originated in the Hypermedia User Experience Engineering 2020 application. Is this what you actually want? Yes, I want this application to be able to access my personal data, which is just my profile and my email for now. And then I'm authenticated. Now, when I'm authenticated, there is a few other things that I can have a look at in this $auth variable. So let me quickly refresh this so that the view dev tools are working again. Now, when I look at any instance and have a look at the $auth, it's not available here. Why not? Maybe this is still not working as it should. Well, you can see that in the home component there is actually this $auth. So I don't know why I'm not able to have a look at it. Okay, because I'm in the view dev tools and all of those references are in VM, not in $0. Okay, now I can have a look at the auth. And in here you can see, yeah, it is a view instance. It has all of the properties and methods of a view instance, but it also has things like is authenticated, is loading, and also user data. And this is the data that is sent by auth0 and is now packed in the access token. So there's also a debug page in here which gives you the data that's in the JOT. Which is the data that's been stored on auth0 for this user. In auth0 you can also have a look at all of your users. So when I go to users and roles for this application, I can see there's this manual test at example.com, which has logged in 3 minutes ago. Now, I do have this job now. Let's see if I can access it to show you the token itself. Or, yeah, let's just call the API with this token. You can see that here's another route that's called external API, and this route is only available when the user is authenticated. And in here I can call the API. Now, I've used Axios to do the API call, but you can also use fetch or xhr, whatever you want. And yeah, it's now just calling the API, and all you have to do to make the authorization is add an authorization header. Now, there are various types of authorization, various guidelines, best practices, and also standards. But when you use the JOT, you have to use the keyword bearer and then add the token. And this auth plugin can give you the token in this get token silently method. And yeah, then you just call the API. Now let's have a look at the network to see this API call. And the API returns your access token was successfully validated. This is also what we have here. And everything works now. And when you look at the external API, you can see that the request was made with an authorization header, with the bearer keyword and with my JOT token. So if you've never seen a JOT access token before, this is this token. And yeah, you can read up on JOT tokens at jot.io, I think, is the domain. You can see the specification, how it came to be, and what they plan on doing. And there's also a debugger for your JOT. It gives you a warning that JOTs are credentials which can grant access to resources, so be careful when you paste them. But it's actually pretty safe to do this because all of this decoding happens on the client, so nothing is sent to a server. This is a very short example token, and my token is longer, and you will see why in a bit. If I paste this here, you can see it's a bit longer because it has more data in it. So yeah, there's some data as to where the application can get the user info, which is then used by the auth0 client. But these are actually details that you don't have to concern yourself with. But you should, of course, know what you're doing actually under the hood. So it's not enough as a developer to just know how to do things, but also to know how your dependencies work and what security issues there might be. Yeah, and of course I can also log out again. And to see that the route guard is working, I can now try to access a route where I need a user. So what are my routes called? My route is called /profiles. Okay, that is easy. Now when I go to /profile, the application will redirect me to auth0 again so that I can log in. And here I can log in with my user that I've created a few minutes ago, and I have to remember the password already. And if all of this is well, I'm then being redirected to the application again, and I'm logged in again. Now, yeah, I hope this will help you in your applications. So yeah, beware if you want to do authentication, use an external service, and when you do all of this, you can then post to an API safely. Okay, so that's all for now. And yeah, I will write down a few questions regarding communication again. And yeah, see you next time.